So Angela, thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate your time.
Pleasure, an absolute pleasure.
I'm going to turn it over to our incredible Menachem Repburn, who is going to start our dialogue.
Thanks for that introduction. And usually we start by asking something more on a personal note. So I really just wanted to ask about you, what inspired you, your involvement with when it comes to disability advocacy and employment for people who have IDDs. What motivated you to get involved in, helping?
Yeah, what inspired me to get involved with disability advocacy was really my own story. About 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with a disability, and it's a vestibular disorder. I remember feeling at the time misunderstood. People didn't know what it was, what it meant, and feeling as if it was something that I needed to keep to myself and not tell my employer because of my fear of my abilities being discounted or my ability to kind of rise within the organization stifled. And so I kept it to myself. And it was a lot of work because it is, it's something that does kind of affect my energy level sometimes. I travel, sometimes it has an effect on me. But I just knew that or felt that. And by the way, it's not that there was ever any language that said if someone is disabled, et cetera, that, these kinds of things would be held against them. It was just a personal feeling that I had. And that was a previous employer. And so when I came to Voya, one of the things when I interviewed with my CEO and he talked to me about was his own desire to find a way to help people who have disabilities and their caregivers have financial freedom and security. And honestly, I couldn't believe it. It was so surprising to me that would just be something that would be a passion. I had never heard of anyone having that passion or work in this space. And so it was one of the reasons why I felt like Voya Financial is probably the kind of company that I can join and be comfortable working at.
It's really, it's really amazing that you can kind of take your own personal experience with disability and translate it into empathy and helping other people. For the next question, I was kind of just going to ask, there are some ways that with Voya, you've actually helped with improving inclusion and employment for people with IDDs, and how can that model be applied to, how do you think other organizations can apply that same model to have greater inclusion?
I think one of the things is just being intentional. I think that we have been very intentional to work to create an environment where all people feel as if their differences are celebrated and understood. It's been a few years since we established an employee resource group that focuses on disabilities and special needs. And when we launched it, it was incredible. It grew so quickly, more quickly than any of our employee resource groups that we've launched in the past. And part of what that group did is, and it's, by the way, it's still one of the fastest growing, it included everyone, caregivers, people with disabilities, people with children with special needs, really any individual who had an interest in knowing and understanding and being part of advocacy. And that employee resource group really started to help us create this environment where people felt celebrated and had all of these educational programs and speaker series. We did a self-identification campaign, voluntary, for our employees to actually, employment system, they could actually self-identify as having a disability or a special need. We had 40% of our employees during those first 3 months to self-identify. And that's either, yes, I have a disability, no, I don't have a disability, or no, I don't wish to answer. But just that we were able to engage our employees in doing the self-identification so we could start tracking and measuring and understanding how well we're doing. Because we specifically started to focus on recruiting, hiring, helping people understand etiquette around the way in which they interact and talk with. We've got, we've published on our external website etiquette tips about interacting with individuals with disabilities and special needs. And so we worked to create an environment where people like me felt like they could raise their hand, not just in the workday system, but also just with their colleagues. I actually had not, we had done all of this work. I had been leading diversity and inclusion, and we had a town hall in our New York office. And I was having a fireside chat with one of our colleagues who's been very open about his own experiences, having to have some really significant surgery, which has affected him physically and also cognitively. And so he was talking about, how accepting his colleagues were, his manager was, when he had to have this time out. And we actually have a video about him on our website too. The gentleman's name is Jody Smith. And during that conversation, mind you, I had been working at Voya at this point for maybe 3 years, 4 years. Never had talked about my own disability. And during that conversation, I just felt compelled to talk about my own challenges, to talk about my own disability. And, I'm a senior vice president, and, it's not as if I have to think about, oh, will I be able to progress in the organization? I'm doing okay. But I had still never felt that confidence until that very time. And there was something there was a relief that I felt in saying it, because again, it was something that I felt like I had to keep in. At the same time, there was fear, like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? What did I just say? What did I just disclose? And the response from my colleagues, beautiful, extraordinary. But I felt safe because of the environment that we had nurtured. I felt safe because I know that the people at Voya are caring, empathetic people. I'm so glad that I did that, because when I did, it also gave other people a feeling that they could talk about those things, whether their own things, their family things, etc. It just goes to show it's all about nurturing the environment to make sure that people feel safe and accepted, and that there's no limit to what they can do.
Yeah, I think it's really great that Voya has that approach. Do you think there's anything that a way to get other organizations to follow that same model?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think that nonprofits and organizations like Creative Spirit are doing exactly that. Together with Creative Spirit and some of our other nonprofit partners, we have been trying to ensure that we are telling the story, we are sharing the research, we are being advocates, and we are being intentional about inviting other companies in and helping them to understand that, talent is equally distributed, it's equally dispersed. It is opportunity that is not. It is access that is not. We have been a part of multiple kind of events together with Creative Spirit and some of our other partners on the New York Stock Exchange and through other venues where we specifically do advocate and do our best to bring other companies along. I think it first starts with understanding and awareness for companies. Look, before we started with this work at Voya, I didn't have an understanding of how underemployed individuals with IDDs are. I didn't have any idea about how when individuals with IDDs actually are employed, their retention is higher than employees who do not have IDDs. I didn't know about job coaches who can help facilitate work that is happening and individuals who may need that support. I didn't know that existed. So part of it is education. Part of it is also helping employers know and understand that it's not about, do you have jobs for individuals with IDDs? That's not the question to ask. The question to ask is, what is the job? And what are the skills that are required? And then you cast your net wide. There's no such thing as what are the jobs for women? Oh, we've got to figure out if we've got jobs for Black people. Oh, we've got to figure. No, it's what are the jobs? What are our needs? And then it's being very open and intentional about going to find the individuals who've got those talents and those skills.
I agree. I think that's a great answer. And I think I'm just going to pass it over to Joanna for the last segments, for the next few segments.
Awesome.
All right. As someone that's dyslexic, and Malcolm can speak to his own experiences, but I think that concept of actually exposing yourself and speaking, can be so difficult. And I'm impressed and proud to hear your story, because I think that we need more representation, honestly, to help facilitate that at every company. So thank you. I want to talk about that because I think, Malcolm touched a little bit on this, but it was the 75th year of National Disability Employment Awareness Month. But it was also the 30th year of Americans with Disabilities Act. And you mentioned briefly, opportunity is not shared equally. I think what we're talking about now is not that the rights don't exist, but that the actions are not being taken. And how do we encourage businesses to take those actions? And I think this next question is really important, because we're asking, from your perspective as an expert in the field, what are some things and practical steps that people can take in an organization, whether it be from a leadership perspective or from an employee perspective, to become more inclusive and supportive for the people in the organization with IDTs to come forward? I love the idea that you presented about having a survey. I think that's a great practical first step. And are there ways that Voya is looking to expand that step into more practical applications? And what do you guys see for the future for you guys? But also maybe some ideas that you think another organization might want to take on to just get the process started, because as we know, it's a spectrum of who knows how to get started and who doesn't, and how do we take those bridge steps to get where we need to get, which is in a few years, hopefully full inclusion, never looking at disability as a barrier for employment. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think sometimes it is that fear of the first step that keeps folks from starting on the journey. What we did, and I think that it's something that could benefit other companies, as we were thinking about this, is we talked to our employees. We held focus groups. We had conversations with our employees to understand perhaps their needs, perhaps the needs of those in their family, what they knew and understood about disabilities or special needs. We really wanted to also understand kind of financial implications, challenges, stresses in the workplace. And through those conversations, one, it helped our employees understand the importance of trying to not only create an environment where we were supportive of individuals with disabilities or special needs and their caregivers, but also that we wanted to think about our own unique talents and skills, about how to address the gap that exists for full access and equality. And so we thought, as a financial services company, that is where we start. That is where we begin. And I think, as if companies can, one, just kind of put themselves in the situation of saying, we don't know all of the answers, but what we do know is that we want to make a difference. And perhaps they start inside and internally. Understand your own HR policies and practices. Understand your own accessibility from your environment. Understand your own barriers, your leaders' barriers in terms of how they think about talent and who should be part of their organization. Define diversity in its broadest, most inclusive sense. Ensure that you are communicating clearly about your intentions to be an organization that is inclusive of those with disabilities and special needs. Well, nothing happens accidentally. If you think it's a nice thing to do and you say, yeah, by the way, that we think that it's really wonderful to have individuals with IDDs. So what? What are you doing actively? How are you ensuring that individuals with IDDs know that Voya is the kind of place where you are celebrated and welcomed? And so it is incumbent upon employers to, one, be very vocal about their intention. As we say with anything, you can recruit and bring in as many people as you want from underrepresented groups. If they come in and they don't have a supportive environment, one, they don't stay. And two, while they're there, their experience is certainly not what you would want for that individual. In order to start to think about what kind of environment do you have, one of the things that I tell companies, organizations is take the leap and do the Disability Equality Index survey. Disability Equality Index survey will give you so much information to understand your own environment. I'm happy to say that Voya Financial scored 100% on the DEI for the past couple of years. We didn't the first time we took it, but what it helped us understand was where our gaps were, where our opportunities were, how accessible were our web pages, both internally and externally. It asks you questions about how inclusive you are as an organization. And we had an entire task force that was multidisciplinary that we put together when we embarked on this work. Again, that was focused both internally, but also externally. And as we thought about where we uniquely suited to make a difference, it was with helping individuals or caregivers find avenues for financial security. And so we created a program called Voya Cares. It does just that. It's a complicated labyrinth when you're talking about really being a caregiver or thinking about retirement readiness. I myself, I don't have children. And, I know that I have disabilities, not just the one that happened 20 years ago. I've actually had a couple of lung surgeries, but I have to plan. I have to think about my own care, and so a program like Voya Cares helps caregivers, helps individuals think about what are all the milestones? What are all the things throughout life? Whether it's from a birth of a child, that has an IDD through their own retirement, elder years. And so it helps with that roadmap and the solutions and the services that provide support for what is very complex, particularly when you start thinking about benefits and government services and all of that kind of thing. So if companies think about what is my unique ability to contribute, it's going to be different for a pharmaceutical company, for a consumer products company, for a transportation company. But we all have something that we should be adding into our frame of thought. To me, this is the last hurdle in terms of, equality for all. And it's not to say that the race has been won for, folks from other underrepresented groups, but this is the one that hasn't gotten the attention and the focus that it needs. When we think about the sheer numbers who are affected by disabilities and special needs, and the lack of understanding and awareness, we've got a lot of work to do. We need everyone, every company, every individual to be part of making tomorrow better, making opportunities more accessible to all.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, that's lovely. And I agree. I think that those are some very practical steps that people can take. And I agree. I think it's just about getting started for what makes sense for them and seeing the intention and what your intention is as an organization. So thank you. And I would say the last question, which is really interesting, you touched upon And I'm sorry to hear about your surgeries, because that is terrifying right now to think about lung surgery and being vulnerable as it is with COVID, because it's a pandemic. It's unprecedented, as everyone keeps saying. I find it difficult to say that word because it's been said so many times, but complex environment that we're living in. And I think what's interesting is how it has affected potentially the landscape for people with disabilities that are searching for employment. Is there something that about COVID and this moment that in time that makes disability advocacy more accessible and more important in a sense, because we see its effect so deeply and so personally? And I'm so curious to hear what you might think about how COVID-19 might have changed this landscape.
I think that there are challenges that already existed that have only been amplified, quite frankly. So many people with IDDs have, either trained caregivers or service providers that they have not been able to have access to, or that having access to is something that is concerning because of everyone's, focus on their own health and safety. And then when you think about individuals who perhaps are still in school, who require special assistance, who require, in-person access or in-person kind of support and teaching, then it starts to get really, really complicated. And there have been a number of, individuals who've probably lost almost an entire year, quite frankly, from an education perspective. And then you think about other things, right, that some of us, kind of take for granted. Like, the fact that now it's all virtual visits instead of going into doctor's offices. That's not something that's as easy for people who may not be verbal. There are all of these particular things that when you are a person within this vulnerable state, more vulnerable state, recognize and understand how complex it can be. There are some healthcare providers who have really been on the forefront in terms of providing those benefits for individuals to make sure that they have the care and the support that they need. We have done a lot of that at Voya. We are an employee benefits provider, and so we have been working to ensure that our benefits are very holistic, very comprehensive. These challenges have definitely been, I think, felt more acutely for those who are vulnerable. And then, folks who have IDDs sometimes fall within that realm. However, on the flip side and on the positive side, there is now, I would say, a level playing field in terms of access, in terms of individuals being able to join companies or be a part of companies where geography and transport and commuting no longer plays a role. They are able to perhaps be in their own space where they already have all of the equipment and things set up to ensure that they could be successful and productive, etc. It is definitely the case that there have been some amazing opportunities that have also opened for individuals. I have an employer who, from week one, when I told my situation, he said, absolutely, you don't come in. You take your laptop, you go home, you come in when you're comfortable. Little did we know the fact that we were able to just kind of flip the switch and do that instantly, right? So that I could be safe and I could feel safe. And so there's so many companies who have, told their employees, will come back when it's safe to come back in some form or fashion. And that's basically what we have communicated to our employees as well. We already know that it will not be before July. And so I think that, employers who have the ability, obviously all of these essential workers who are helping to keep the lights on for us and to get us fed, and our medical practitioners and everyone else, we are so grateful and thankful for all of them. But for those who have that flexibility to be remote, it has opened doors for individuals with IDDs.
I love that. I think it's great. And I think it's so interesting and timely that, we're able to have these conversations because, first of all, we're doing it over Zoom safely, which is wonderful. And then second of all, I think it's also it's something we've heard a lot of recently, which is access. I mean, true access for people with disabilities. I mean, we were talking about nonverbal. What about the deaf? What about the hearing impaired? What about those that literally live in a chair and can't move from here down? Technology has been our portal for access for me personally and others that I know for so long. And I think that it's an important evolution that we accept and acknowledge flexibility, adaptability, remote working, whatever the next phase will be, we don't know yet, diversity in the workplace to evolve because it needs to. And I think that's what we're talking about here when we ask for advice from experts like you, because we're saying, look, we know we don't have access, but how do we do it? I mean, many individuals with disabilities, and maybe you know this, start their own businesses because they can't handle being a part of a community that won't accept them, which is wonderful and entrepreneurial and builds our small businesses. But who's being hit the most right now? Small businesses.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thankfully to Voya, companies like Voya who are making this priority, because that what you guys are doing is providing that next step for people that want to be included and build back better. I mean, that's the truth, right? That's what we're all doing right now. So why not include as many as we can to help make that happen if we are able? So I love that. Thank you.
And Joanna, by the way, this has opened eyes to what is possible. And so we're not going to be going back to, the old way. I think now what we've all understood as employers and as individuals is we don't all have to be in the same physical space to do good work and to build workplace culture. I mean, just this year, we hired 5 individuals with disabilities, and they're able to work from anywhere across the country. And I'll tell you that before this year, we might have said, I mean, they might need to be in a physical office. They're just getting started. How do they learn our culture? How do we make sure we're providing, the environment that will ensure they're productive? And so I think employers, through this change, through this discomfort, has come growth, because we have realized we actually can do this. And it enables us to have this talent pipeline that is enormous. And so it's really very exciting. And, one of the other things that we're doing starting next year, actually, is we're also focusing on ensuring that individuals with disabilities and special needs have prominence in the way that we speak to the world and through our advertising, through our marketing, because we think it's really important for people to see themselves. And that's people of color, that's LGBTQ, that's people with disabilities and special needs. That's something that we have supported in our advertising since we became Voya. And so this is going to be another frontier for us, just to make sure that we are really focusing on the inclusive nature of our marketing and advertising, talking about the specific life stages that individuals with disabilities and special needs have, and the kind of retirement saving financial wellness programs and initiatives that help them throughout the various stages of their life. So I'm really excited about 2021 for that reason. And then as we continue to really, I think, grow in our understanding of how important it is to have this workplace where every single individual has a responsibility to creating a workplace where we're all comfortable. This isn't just my group. This isn't just, our leaders. This is every one of the 6,000 employees at Voya. It's all our job. It is the responsibility of each of us.
That's fabulous. And I can't wait to see where you guys go next, truly. And anything we can do to support you guys in your next steps. I mean, we love you guys. So no worries from us. We just want you to keep going on and up as far as we can go with this. So thank you so much, Angela, for spending time.
Thank you.
We really, really appreciate it. And
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Look forward to maybe another one sometime in the new year. We'll see what happens.
Thank you. And Creative Spirit is a dear partner of ours as well. And so it was such a pleasure to be here with you all today.